I think last time we talked, we both lamented that we have amazing sunglass collections that we never get to use, but you did give me permission to use them in the car, so I feel better. So thank you for that. I also figured that, yeah, that's fine. And I figured that both of us probably had to put a shirt on to be able to do this interview. I'm always shirtless in the summertime. I know you are always in your bikini anyway, doing your cartwheels.
Yeah, you
So
gotta get as
I had
much sun, yeah.
to dress a little bit more formal for this. Okay, so according to Kevin Stock, the number one reason that the number one thing that he notices about people who've been carnivore for over 10 years, the number one thing is the why. If you understand your why, that seems to be really common throughout. So I'm glad you answered that question. I'm going to pick a few other things off this list and just hear what your thoughts are. I'll go right to cheats. Like, how many times in 14 years have you gone off the diet?
Well, for me, it was back when my kids were little and we would go to a peach and nectarine orchard in our town. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I got to at least be able to just have, a little. And I just very quickly found when I tried to have half a nectarine, I would have ended up eating two by the end of the day. And then the next day, I'm looking at it and smelling them and seeing which one I want again. So it was that stray cat that once you start feeding it, it just keeps coming back. And then that's when I said, there's just no moderation for me. I need to be abstinent. I need to look at every sweet like that. I mean, maybe some people can have some raspberries and blueberries, and that's great. If that's where you halt it and stop and you're healthy, then I don't see anything wrong with it. But for me, cheating really just meant cheating myself and cheating my health. And I got to the point where I was like, you know what, I just remember the horrible days of in my addiction where I would pull together like a week or two and be like, all right. And then I'd be in the ditch again. And then I'd pull myself out and I'd be okay for another few days. And then in the ditch again, I'm like, you have to realize that these cheats end up being a slippery slope down to where you don't want to be, because heck, this is the whole point of this, is getting away from that addiction and getting away from the draw of eating food that's really not healthy.
Yeah. When I'm talking to somebody about this, I may even concede to them. Like, let me just give it to you that fruits are more healthy. I don't agree with that, but let me just concede that to you. My problem is if I had a quote unquote healthy fruit, it's not necessarily the fruit itself, it's everything after that. That would make me so hungry. And then I would go eat all kinds of stuff that I really didn't want to be eating. And the fruit, like you said, was the trigger. So regardless of whether or not it's healthy or not, debate it if you like, but it's just you're reintroducing that sweet food. It's going to make me very hungry, and I will go eat a lot of stuff that I really shouldn't be eating. So that's nice. So again, remembering your why, it's easy for you to kind of stay on, and you don't really get off very often. I think that's great. Another thing that he talked about in this list was coffee. Where are you on coffee on a carnivore diet?
Oh gosh, that's such a loaded question, because I used to be a coffee drinker through college, grad school, even years and years into it. Because who doesn't, people who are into coffee, which think it's a crazy amount, the statistic of the percentage of the population that's addicted to caffeine is so high. But so here's my thing with coffee. So about 4 years into carnivore, I was still having my cup of coffee in the morning. I wasn't like a crazy coffee drinker, but I had my coffee in the morning. And then I got to the point where I thought to myself, I don't want to be addicted to anything. And I got to get up and have this cup, because if you don't, the next day you're going to get a little headache, you're going through withdrawal from the drug. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Why do I keep putting this drug in my body just to have to keep putting it in? And so I made the decision. I was like, all right, I'm going to switch to decaf. And I drank decaf for years. And not that decaf's really any better because of the decaffeination process. And there's still caffeine in decaffeinated coffee and all this. But I didn't know that at the time. I was just, happy I was off the caffeine. And then fast forward to really just a couple years ago, when I started listening and reading more and more. I mean, there's a book called The Caffeine Blues. I have some really good articles regarding caffeine and its detrimental effects, and raises your triglycerides. It totally messes up your cortisol and your adrenals. The hormones get messed up, your sleep gets messed up. And it is really, it's got like 700 biochemical components to it aside from the caffeine. And you have to think about it. You are literally bathing your microbiome in this. It's not good for your microbiome. So anybody with leaky gut, autoimmune issues, you really should be drinking water. And so I am, I realize nobody wants to give up their coffee. And I'm going to say the people out in this space who are promoting it and making videos about the benefits of coffee, and it's a psychotropic drug. It's not, you got to call a spade, but these people that are cherry picking some of these studies that might be funded by the coffee bean industry, let's get that straight, because this is a multi-billion, trillion-dollar industry. I don't even know. But you have to remember that these people are addicted themselves to, I call them, they're on the bean. They're addicted, and they're going to, of course, try to really preserve keep their addiction. And so I am, I tell people, try it, just give it up for 6 months and tell yourself you can go back to it. And I say the other thing is you really need to have a substitute, because we love the ritual of it. We love the aroma of it. We love the warmth of it. And so I have a lot of my clients do what I call the hot nog drink, which is a couple tablespoons of butter, put some boiling water, take a rechargeable frother and stick it in there and froth it up, and then add a couple raw egg yolks, keep frothing, and it gets this beautiful, luscious, foamy hot drink. And that's a nice substitute. At the beginning, maybe even pour in a touch of some decaf coffee and get yourself off of really the whole caffeine first. And then you can do things like hot broth, hot salty water. If you put Redmond seasoned salt in some hot water in a little Yeti mug, it's like a very delicious, and then whisk a tablespoon of butter in that. It's amazing. So it's the mindset. It's really having a substitute. And honestly, hot water with a little wedge of lemon floating in it tastes just like herbal tea. And that's the other thing people say, well, what about tea? Well, tea is from a couple sources I've read and looked into, is worse than coffee because it's tea leaves, and the leaves are the worst part of a plant. And the same thing, the coffee, it's not a bean, it's actually a seed. So here we go. This is a seed, right? And what are we doing? We're burning the seed, we're grinding it, we're pouring boiling water over it, and then we're drinking it multiple times a day, every day. So you got to just think long and hard. But I know people are like deer in the headlights when I start talking about stopping that. But that's not the first thing that needs to go. The sugar, the carbs, the seed oils, the processed foods, we have to take this in stages. And I don't pull the rug out from under people right away with the coffee. I just say, you know what, if you have certain issues that we want to resolve, we have to think about doing this. And, if you want to make a change, you have to make a change. And the other thing too, is that last 10% thing that people hold on so tightly, whether it's artificial sweeteners, and that's a whole other thing, or their caffeine, that last thing that they're like, oh, I can't imagine life without it. That's usually the one thing they most need to give up. And it's really just more of a personal decision.